Okay, so we're back. Today we're going to be talking about saying thanks to trauma. Okay, so basically this idea, it is coaching and soft skills, and the idea is that you learn a lot more from your traumas, or for example your fails, than you do a lot more from your wins. Okay, so you'll always learn more from failing than winning, and generally, well, failing in general is better for your personal development and for you as a person because you have to step back then and think more about the fact like where did you go wrong or what did you do right, what did you do wrong, where could you improve for the next time. So basically a lot of the time we are defined by our traumas or by our fails. Now I'm going to be using trauma kind of interchangeably with fails anyway. Okay, so you have to think about like what have you gone through in your life, what are your successes, your wins, or your fails, or your traumas. Okay, and then think about where, in what context did you learn more. Obviously I'll always refer back to video games because I love video games, but obviously when you're going through a really long game, the actual journey of like developing your character, getting stronger or getting faster or better, or actually going through the game is the enjoyable part. It's only when you actually max out your character or when you get to 10 in all of his levels that the game becomes quite boring and quite frustrating. So that's kind of the same way it is in our lives then day to day, that like we always might think about this perception of who we are and where we are existing in the world, our family or our friends or something like this. But then when we have those successes, it's kind of empty and there's nothing to it anymore. And then it's dead. So when you have a fail, obviously it is very frustrating. Sometimes it's heartbreaking, very traumatic in general. But then you think a lot more because of why you failed, and you have to step back and then think about it a lot as well. So you think, what defines you as a person? Is it the great successes that you've had in your life? Is it finishing university? Is it buying your car, buying your house, something like that? Or is it the time when you didn't get that job that you really wanted? Is it the time that you really didn't get the girl that you really liked, or like when you really had a very, very traumatic experience, or you got fired from your job or something like this, you know? So you do have to think about that a lot then. And then, who are you when no one is looking? Yeah, so that's the other question then as well. So today you're going to kind of use a little bit of a different format where I'll be using some questions and kind of working off a script that I made about this topic. So when we're talking about saying thanks to trauma, you have to really go back and then think about all of the losses and fails that you've had in your life, and then to think like, okay, am I actually better because those things happened to me or not? And then that's the really important thing that I wanted to convey today with this talk, is that who are you when there's no one there with you? I will talk about this in the future, like in regard to the Japanese concept of the three masks, you know. But who are you really when there's no one around you? When you're not putting on a mask or a different face or trying to act more like the fake reality that you're giving to people. Obviously, there is kind of a schism in our modern society then as well, because I mean, a lot of people spend their days on social media and projecting this idea that they're incredibly successful, or that they travel a lot, or that they're, I don't know, consuming or always winning and that kind of stuff as well. But obviously the negative about social media is that like it can't always be successes and these amazing things. So I mean, that is a really interesting thing, that you're getting a slice of a very fake reality of a person that maybe is not very happy in general. And then obviously they're not expressing how they failed or how they've actually overcome something, or maybe how like they've benefited so much from a big fail that they've had recently. So that's the a very interesting topic then to kind of sit back and think about then as well. So think about like the three most recent or the three biggest upsets that you've had in your life. The three things that really knocked you out, you know, and you had to kind of collect yourself again and then go back to the drawing board and think about, okay, who am I as a person? What am I doing? Okay, I lost my job. I really love my job. And then how can I get better in the future? How can I get an even better job in the future? Or then, is that like the right motivation for me? Do I really want this job, or is it for the prestige or the money or something like this, you know? So thinking about how you can improve yourself. And I will say this a lot, but obviously doing a lot of, exercise, obviously eating right, sleeping properly, and drinking water. They're like the four tenets that are really, really important for most people. And then I think that was the really bad thing about the pandemic as well, is that like a lot of people didn't actually get sunlight from day to day. They weren't eating properly. They were snacking a lot, very sedentary all the time, you know, just sitting down, binge watching TV, or else like For me, I was teaching classes online, and it could get very, very tedious because I'm sitting for a long, long time. And it's very heavy as a teacher, well, a good teacher anyway, that you're sitting down and you have to give a lot to your class. It has to be dynamic, it has to be interesting, almost like this kind of a podcast style, you know. So I think that's the really important thing to think about that then as well, is that like, are you feeding yourself the things that you really need? And they would be those 4 topics that I said before. So how can you have a better life? Are you mixing with the right people? Are you building things up in your head in like this fake reality, or thinking about things before they actually happening? Are you actually like celebrating your successes before you get them? Which is very, very traumatic as well, is that like, even though something might be planned, and then you might think, oh, I'm going to do this with this or anything like that, or this is what I'll do when I get this. It's actually very, very negative for yourself to do that, you know. So only celebrate your wins when you actually have a win to celebrate. How can you be happy? What is happiness defined in your idea, you know? So I mean, what would make you happy? Is it a new car every 3 years? Is it this really, really big house that maybe you have trouble paying? Is it working in a very comfortable job and not having to push yourself a lot, you know, just to go there for 8 to 10 hours a day, do what you have to do, go home, forget about it, and then that's it? Or are you a different type of animal then? Are you the kind of guy that has to go 1 hour early to get a start on his emails and talk to everybody around the office, that kind of thing, like very kind of a social setting, I suppose is what you would say, you know, and then start your day and push yourself a lot, study something at night or at the same time then when you're working, you know, and then try and get to the next level as much as possible. So then, is that really what you want? And then what is the thing you want to get out of that? A lot of people really just want money, and they just want like numbers in their bank account to keep going up and up and up. Or for example, they just want like a piece of paper so that they can define their success or anything like that. And then, like I talked about this in the previous video, I think it's number 4. So I mean, are you trying to be happy? Are you trying to be content? And then which one is really, really important for you? Because happy is that 2-second kind of, oh my God, that's fantastic, really, really good. And then you think about the reality. Whereas with content, then you're happy to wake up on a Monday morning, or else even you're not happy, but you're not like downtrodden and deflated having to go to your job. Because really, if you keep doing that, it can only last for so long. And then, I mean, how long, well, what's the longevity in a situation like that, you know? So, I mean, I think now a lot of people don't really expect to suffer or to really work for something that much, you know. It's kind of instant gratification all the time. So you have to kind of remember, this is a very Buddhist idea, you know, but I mean, obviously, like, living is basically suffering, you know, and then that you get more meaning out of your life the more you suffer sometimes. And it is kind of a harsh reality that some people really don't want to talk about a lot, you know, is that they really want to have a very easy, comfortable life. They don't want to take any risks. But I really think that one of the most important kind of phrases I've ever kind of had in the back of my head whenever I've been working or going through my career or anything like that is that, like, fortune favors the bold. That, like, if you don't want to take risks, maybe that's very safe and comfortable in the short term, but in the long term, then eventually, from a lot of the people that I've talked to and coached to in general, that they're not really happy where they ended up in their career, you know. And then, for example, like, I always remember this case of like this guy that I was working in a company, and this guy was very, very quiet, very, very introverted. He went and did the bare minimum every single day, but he used to get to work at the same time as me. So I would see him spend 10 minutes every single day putting like a dust cover over his car. And he put more effort into covering that car for the first 10 minutes before he even started his day than he did for the rest of the 10 hours, you know, doing his job as an engineer. And that was really interesting for me because obviously he valued that more than his job. And then he was there for, I think, 8-9 years or something like that. And he was fine. He was middle of the road, nothing special, nothing, he wasn't bad, he wasn't great at his job, basically, you know. And then when it came time then that the company had to downsize, then, I mean, when his boss fired him or said, look, we have to let you go, I'm sorry, he started crying. And I mean, his boss was really shocked. He was like, okay, why haven't I seen that emotion from you in 8 or 9 years, you know? I mean, you literally, well, in Mexico you say a barco, which is like a very passive person, you know. But it's really interesting is that, like, maybe some people really have problems like expressing themselves correctly, or else they kind of get into this kind of waking coma in their job where they think like, oh, look, this is safe, I just have to do this, this and this, and then that's it, and they don't have to work on themselves anymore. But definitely that guy that I'm talking about, the guy with the car cover, obviously he went away and then he realized that he had suffered a big trauma and a big fail. So hopefully then in the future, he kind of pushed himself a little bit more. And definitely from getting fired, from my experience talking to a lot of people, is that when you get fired, it's such a shock, because that's your hard skills, your education, and your experience, and then also your soft skills like interacting with people or interpersonal skills, anything like that. It's such a huge shock then to your ego, as well as that, like, the next time you have to go for a job, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you. You probably have bills to pay, and then you work a lot harder. And then obviously, in the infancy of the new job, you're kind of trying to define who you are as a person in that company, and then give that. How would you say, to portray that persona to your coworkers, to say, oh, look, he's a no nonsense guy, he's really professional, he's really, I don't know, punctual, those kinds of things. And it's one of those really, really interesting things. So you have to kind of think about that yourself then. Are you in a waking coma when it comes to your job, in your career, in your education, in your life, as a father, as a mother, husband, anything like that, as a brother, as a sister, And I mean, is it necessary sometimes then to have one of these big traumas to kind of wake you up and make you appreciate what you really have? So, I mean, they're highly beneficial, these big traumas in your life. They leave like a crack within you that you have to try and fix and repair, and then try not to take it personally then as well, but maybe sometimes then as well take it professionally, is that like maybe I wasn't pushing myself enough to maintain my job or to be in a happy marriage or anything like that, and step back and kind of reflect and think more about yourself then as well. So as a parent then as well, maybe you think you're this fantastic parent, but then like your kids grow up to be, I don't know, a teenager or something like that, and they have no motivation, or they get kind of lost along the way, and they kind of fuck up as they're going through their like adolescent years, So that's a really, really important thing to think about. As a teacher anyway, I've had to step back a lot, and like you do get reviewed by your students several times in a short, well, for example, a 6-month course, you should probably get evaluated 2 or probably 3 times. So then you can kind of actually see, and it's always anonymous as well, you can see if the students actually like you, and then if they actually understand what you're doing for them and with them in class. And then as like a manager or a leader of a team then as well, obviously you'll be able to see the results kind of etched in stone if people aren't working well together, if you're not getting the right results, And I think that's a really, really important thing. Going back, talking about the parenting thing then as well, is that like you don't want to coddle your children too much, and you don't want to leave them in this kind of social bubble where they think everything is perfect. My parents always have everything for me. And, a lot of kids that I meet, well, not kids, but like teenagers who are starting to grow up, they have no idea about how much like food costs or petrol or anything like that, So it's kind of like breaking down these barriers that you've kind of protected them from seeing the real reality. And then definitely, is that like you want to prepare your kid to go and explore the world. You want him to be able to say, oh, I'm going to move to Canada for 3 years and see how I get on. And then if I don't like it, I'll move back. So, I mean, you might think then, oh, that's kind of a little bit frivolous, or he's not very responsible or mature. But then really, to take a big risk like that, it's really, really great, because you can really define yourself from taking a big risk like that. I mean, I did the same myself 11 years ago. So, I mean, went to Mexico, no real idea about anything in the society. Obviously, if you live in Ireland and you're listening to Mexico, all you hear are the worst things imaginable, But I mean, the way I thought about it is that, like, how can 126 million people live in the size of a country that is all the countries of Europe put together? And how can things be okay, So, I mean, I didn't want to have the stereotypes, mainly negative stereotypes of Mexico, to ruin my experience. So then I came here, and I started my life, started a family, started my business over here, and like I really, really love living here a lot, So that's really, really great. So you have to think then as well, are you toiling in a field? Are you like Sisyphus, pushing that boulder up the hill? And that like finally at the end of the day, when you have no more energy, or are you just like completely gone and you let the ball roll all the way back down as well? Are you in that kind of negative cycle then as well? Or are you getting to the tipping point? Is that like, are you getting to a place where you're preparing yourself so much that you're finally going to get that job that you've always wanted? And then after the tipping point, then it goes to the snowball effect. Is that like really, from what I've seen, talking about managers anyway, is that like, I mean, the people that don't gossip or aren't two-faced and aren't talking behind people's backs or something like that, if they focus on their education and build on their experience and try and get as many skills as possible, that's when the snowball effect can really happen. Is that like they really get to a point where they're very attractive for a lot of companies. So like all of the best managers that I've seen that have done really, really well are focused on themselves and their team in the short term, but themselves then in the long term is that like, okay, where do I want to really be in 10 years time, in 15 years time, something like that. So that's the thing, is that like when it is really, really difficult and when you are suffering these traumas and things like this, just be very, very patient and very dedicated, because it is building to something else. Now, for example, the Grand Irish Elk, or the Great Irish Elk, is the symbol of my family. So my last name is McCarthy on my father's side. So it's really interesting then as well, if you think about this animal, because that animal was destroyed by himself because he couldn't change. This might be a kind of a weird example now, but in general, obviously when the ice age ended and like trees started growing closer together, a lot of animals had existed for a very long time. And so the Grand Irish Elk had these huge antlers. I think they were like 2 meters or maybe a little bit more than that. So obviously with the trees growing closer and closer together, they would get trapped in forests and then they would eventually die. So I think that's a really interesting thing for me to think about as myself, is that like if you're not willing to adapt to your environment, then you really won't survive. It's very Darwinian, I suppose, but I mean, it is one of those really interesting topics that you can think about, is that like for me, when I was thinking more about the symbol, which I used for my language school then as well, I was thinking like, okay, how can I adapt to my environment in order to get better, or how to evolve, because I was working in a public university. I was making good money, but it was in another city, so I was having to travel 6 days a week and come back, and I was working in 2 other jobs then as well. So I mean, I was looking at my colleagues or co-workers in that institution, and I mean, it was a great place. I really don't regret my time there at all. I really, really loved it. But I was thinking like, you guys are a little bit too comfortable. You have tenure, or like you have a fixed contract, you get your vacations paid, everything like that. But you're really not advancing or evolving at all. You're just in a very kind of peaceful, I don't know, blinkered kind of existence. So then after that, then I really did kind of have that in my mind that I wanted to do something else. And I realized that my time was worth a lot of money, and that I really wanted more for myself and for my family. So that's why I had to push myself a lot. So I think then on the other side of things, then on my mother's side, it's Kelly. So the sign of, or the symbol of Kelly, is the lion. So another thing then as well, so for example, for these coaching videos, then I use the lion symbol for my coaching videos, and then the elk or deer symbol then for my language school. So I think for the lion, then it's all about being perceived as something that you're not. So a lot of people would say like, oh, the lion is the king of the jungle, when like there's no lions in jungles. So obviously that's one kind of weird thing, that is this really common phrase, but I mean, it's really not true. And then when we think about that, then I mean, the lion is the protector of the pack or the pride, and then it's the lioness then that goes, hunts, kills, and takes care of the kids, everything like that. And the lion is really just sitting there, and in case there's a problem, then he can attack. So he's really there to protect. But people's idea of the lion is very, very different, is that they see him as this huge predator and things like that, whereas he's a protector mainly, but he's not really a provider. So it's all about, like, for me, it was really important to think about those two sides, and then to think about, okay, how can I work that into my coaching talks, courses, everything really, and think about like, okay, am I really a protector? Am I taking care of my family? Where do I need to change in order to develop really, So I'm going to cut this video now because I'm getting to around 20 minutes. So this is part 1, and then part 2 will be coming along shortly. Okay, so like and subscribe to my channel if you want to be updated for like the next video that comes up. Leave any comments below, and thank you very much. Have a nice day.